Welcome to another Live with Courage special edition podcast episode, where we encourage you to listen however you like. Maybe on the porch with a cup of coffee, by the pool with your favorite tasty beverage, or our personal favorite, with your headphones on, tuning out the world. We are happy to have you here. Learn something new. Be inspired. Listen and visualize. Feel empowered. Live with courage. To a Live with Courage podcast. I'm Christina, and today we're talking about suicide prevention with a special guest appearance from my friend Michelle. Michelle, thanks for joining me for this podcast. This is a challenging topic for me to discuss, so it's nice to have some support.
I'm glad to be here and support you.
So I wanted to do this podcast because suicides are increasing and so are suicide prevention programs and training. I wonder, why are they not working? I'd like to share some personal experiences with you in the hopes of helping others see where we could all improve our suicide prevention efforts. I have been touched by suicide 3 times in my life. Luckily, no one was injured or died. However, these moments have intensified my determination to decrease our suicide rates by filling the prevention gaps. I will share 3 of these moments with you and what each one has taught me. Michelle, are you ready to get started?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's get this party started.
So you are never perfectly prepared.
My child Lance is now a high school graduate and living her best life, but a few short years ago, she was suicidal. I think I knew, but was in denial until one night my intuition screamed at me to just ask her the question. I didn't go about it properly because I honestly did not want to hear that she wanted to die. I was definitely not prepared, as I feel I should have been. You see, I'm a Safe Talk trainer that has taught over 20 classes, which is probably 4 times more classes than most other instructors. I could teach it in my sleep. I knew what to look for. I knew how to ask the question. I knew how to respond. More than 9 million Americans consider suicide every year. That is roughly 1 person per 33 people. Just curious, how many people do you know? More than 33, I bet. So you probably know at least 1 person that is thinking about suicide right now. I should have been prepared for the one day that my child was thinking about suicide. So Safe Talk is this research-based course that has steps that move a person through the process of identifying and helping a person with thoughts of suicide. So the most important step when we are teaching this class is teaching folks how to ask the question. There's like 4 different times that we have them pretend to ask the question to try to get used to just asking, because it's just so hard. When we tell them how to ask the question, we talk about the importance of providing reasons that we believe the person is potentially thinking of suicide. I didn't do that. No wonder my daughter did not tell me right away. Instead, Lance clammed up and sat down in the fetal position, and she was just crying so loud. I was freaking out, like, so bad. And in that moment, I completely forgot my training. And I feel like I should have been more prepared. So based on her physical response, sitting there crying, just clammed up, I knew she was thinking about suicide. I guess it was just that mom's intuition. Then I remembered I was supposed to tell her why I was wondering that if she's thinking about suicide. She still didn't tell me. She instead cried really loud and hard, and I was so angry. I was so angry because we teach this stuff and it's supposed to work. And I was so angry because I'm her mom and I didn't understand why she wouldn't come to me. I was angry at myself for not being a better mom. Like, how did I let my kid get to this point? Like, it was just crazy. And my anger was apparent. So no wonder she still would not tell me right away. Like, I'm just angry mom. Why would she open up to me? And once again, I still feel like I should have been more prepared. So Lance finally nodded the third time I asked her. I panicked. I went into fix mode, which is the number one thing we tell people not to do. I was definitely not prepared for this moment in my life. I asked her sister to be with her while I called a crap ton of people asking what else I could do or should do. And looking back now, I wonder, how did that make my daughter feel? Like, she tells me she's thinking about suicide and I pawn her off on somebody else. So nobody answered. I didn't know what to do, so I just did what the Air Force tells its people to do. I took Lance to the ER. Now, listening to my story, and if you're agreeing with me that I was not as prepared as I thought I should have been, you will not believe that the people at the ER were so not prepared for somebody with thoughts of suicide. I wonder if maybe they only expected to get the attempts or the completions. And once again, I was angry. I tried to be there for my daughter, but I spent the ER time protecting her instead. Once Lance was moved to behavioral health, which is the adult unit at the hospital, she had to await transport to an adolescent hospital. And finally, I was able to calm down and be there with her until, of course, they asked me to leave. So once all the chaos dissipated, because I'm going to tell you right now, that was just the beginning of the chaos of this whole situation. I would be here for like an hour if I told you everything else that went crazy, not on my part. I found myself feeling like I was going to die, like literally. So I went to the ER twice, and they didn't know what was wrong with me. And then I went to the VA, and of course the VA did what the VA does best. They didn't have the resources for me when I most needed them. Had the resources, just not then. A week later, I found out that I was in the middle of a panic attack that was not subsiding, and I was definitely not prepared for that. It was miserable. So I realized that no matter how much training you have, you are not prepared for the first time you experience a loved one wanting to die or kill themselves. It is scary, and that brings a bazillion other thoughts and feelings with it. The most important thing you can do is not give up. That is the one thing that I can give myself credit for, is that I didn't give up. It does not stop being scary, but you learn from every moment in your life. So, Michelle, what do you think about that situation?
I think you were incredibly brave, and I think your daughter thinks you're courageous for it.
Oh, thank you. Do you think that people are prepared when like people that go to classes and stuff, do you think they're really prepared the first time?
Sadly, I think we're in the prevention suicide attempts, but not really suicidal thoughts.
Yeah. So when those happen, like, it's just really hard to deal with. I had students in my class when I was teaching Safe Talk, and some of them, they were just so comfortable in the class because they had experienced their friends, in high school or whatever, that were thinking about suicide. And so it's almost like they were seasoned, and I was just giving them extra tools now to deal with it. So I think that even though we teach, and I think we do a good job of teaching, that we need to look for certain things and that we need to ask questions and we need to be brave, but I don't think training can prepare you for that, no matter how much you role play. So I think we're ready for the next story.
So we are preventing suicide attempts, but not suicidal thoughts.
My daughter Kyra is a soldier in the Army, currently in advanced individual training. She is one of the strongest people I know. I have seen her go through so much emotional and psychological abuse, but she has always moved through it and arrived on top. A few months ago, I talked to her about suicide. This is not the first time, but this time it was about the potential for her thinking about suicide. That probably sounds crazy that I would do that, but I'm smarter than the average parent when it comes to this topic. You see, I started noticing the key ingredients for suicidal ideation. And the reason why I know those key ingredients is because I'm actually pursuing a PhD in psychology, which a lot of what we look at is research based on, suicide and what causes it. I was afraid that it would sneak up on her and it would be too late. So instead, I prepared her for the possibility and explained to her why I was concerned. Of course, being the daughter that she is, she assured me that she will get through it like she always does. But I was really worried that she didn't see what I saw. As time went on after that, her calls and her texts, they started to increase. Like, it was actually very overwhelming. I'm going to say that. They were more desperate. They were incoherent. And then one night, my fear became a reality. My daughter called me at 3:30 in the morning, terrified, because she was thinking about suicide and had the means to do it. Now, I know it sounds crazy that somebody would actually reach out when they're thinking about suicide, because typically we think that we have to find them, but they do. And when they reach out, they're not, calm. It's not like, hey, man, I'm kind of thinking about suicide. It's actually very terrifying to have those thoughts. And a lot of people have those thoughts and they're fleeting. It's when they're not fleeting that they become really, really scary. So I believe that this shouldn't have happened because, the environment was created and it shouldn't have been created. So let me tell you why it did, according to the research, because I'm a nerd like that. And like I said, I'm in my PhD program. So I've been doing a lot of research on suicide prevention. According to RUS, fluid vulnerability theory, suicide risk possesses both active and constant properties that varies around a set point. So picture like a set point in the universe, right? 1 point. That is just the level of risk that everyone has by default. That is your level. The active properties that increase suicide risks, they are triggers, behaviors, emotion, physiology, and cognition. So you have this set point, and if you start adding those things in, then it starts to get you closer and closer to thinking about suicide, if that makes sense, which I hope it does. My daughter has a high set point, which means that she is at low risk for suicide. I know this because I've watched her be super resilient. After 8 months in her training, she was experiencing those active properties that increase suicide risk and created those first thoughts of suicide. So what I mean by that is during those 8 months, Kyra began to withdraw and avoid others. So I started noticing that. She was in immense pain without being treated because the medical team dismissed her. So think about being in pain. And I know some of you listening can resonate with that. Being in pain for 8 months or longer, no medication works, not being able to sleep because of it, that really takes a toll on your mental health. She also experienced insomnia and was often agitated. And usually my daughter is a lot like me, where she can just kind of shake things off and make a joke about it. And she was not doing that at all. She was angry at the world. So she was also shamed, made to feel like a burden, and was not accepted. So these triggers, they turn into hopelessness and self-deprecation. She became angry, ashamed, and often emotionally numb. There were times when I talked to her where she was just like not even a person. She began to have acute anxiety, and that's when I, had her start going to mental health. So I'd like to take this a little bit further with some additional research. There's another bit of research. It's Joyner's Interpersonal Theory of Suicide, and it talks about how suicidal ideation, which is the suicidal thoughts, increases with perceived burdensomeness, thwarted belongingness, and hopelessness. We talk about this all the time in suicide prevention training, right? They feel like they're a burden. They're talking about feeling like a burden. They're talking about not belonging. They're talking about being hopeless. But my question is why are they feeling that way? It's not coming from nowhere. And I think that's where we need to really focus, is why are people feeling this way? And I like how he put perceived burdensomeness, because we may not feel they're a burden, but if they perceive that they are, that's what's important. So granted, his theory also states that one will not act on it unless they have the capacity, which comes from a lower fear of death and high tolerance for pain. But I still feel like, okay, great, we stop people from acting, but how miserable is it to feel like you want to kill yourself? It's just terrible. So Kyra was treated like a burden by her drill sergeants and fellow trainees. She was unable to eat most days because a trainee would not go with her or allow her to go with them, as it is required to have a battle buddy to go anywhere. And I think it's not about a poor me, she couldn't eat. It's more about she was taught in basic training that they're supposed to take care of each other. And so she had the expectation that they were going to take care of each other, and it wasn't happening with her. So she felt like she was the only one and that she was a burden. Drill sergeants would complain every time she asked for help or requested an appointment be made. One drill sergeant even told another trainee that the stain on his wall was probably from someone killing themselves, and that it happens all the time. I was beyond mad when I heard about that. And honestly, I found out, and I think I've already known this. I know enough people that are in the Army. It's just accepted that this is how the Army is. No matter how much training they provide and how much PR that they say, this isn't how we are, it still happens. So my daughter no longer felt like she belonged. She could not be with her class and platoon most of the time because she had appointments or a profile. And if you think about that, how are you supposed to create those relationships and those connections so where people will want to take care of you? Because being told to take care of her wasn't working. So she didn't even have the opportunity to do that. She was told that she was of no use to the Army by her drill sergeants. And then during free time, no one wanted to be around her. Once again, I think it's because she just couldn't make those connections. So I want to touch on hopelessness with the last bit of research, because you'll notice that I didn't really talk about it too much, even though it's a part of Joyner's theory. According to Greg J. Bryan and his colleagues, shame increases state-based hopelessness. So what I mean by state-based is it's not normal level of hopelessness that's within somebody. It's the hopelessness that comes because of things going on in somebody's life. Remember that hopelessness is one of the 3 triggers for suicidal ideation, according to Joyner. So Kyra was shamed so much that she began to feel ashamed. She no longer felt like she deserved to be in the Army, and that was just so heartbreaking when I heard her talking about that, because she fought for a year to get accepted into the Army. She felt like she was letting everyone down just by being herself. Drill sergeants would make fun of her constantly for her individual challenges that were out of her control. So think about that. Sometimes we shame each other for things that are not in their control. That just makes things worse. She was made fun of by her fellow trainees. She had, no control over what was going on. She internalized her challenges, basically believing that she is flawed and ashamed of who she is. This is where people get confused between guilt and shame. She wasn't guilty about what was going on with her. She was ashamed. And it's basically saying, okay, this is something about me that I can't change. I'm useless. So I watched the shame turn my daughter from a hopeful, feisty fighter into a hopeless, defeated victim. Even after she asked for help, she experienced more of the same. So when she went to, when I told her to go see the drill sergeant, the one outside that was leaving said to the one coming on shift, hey, you got a trainee out here with the waterworks. I mean, she's sitting there wanting to kill herself, and they don't even think before they speak. Those that were charged with watching over her and keeping her safe complained to her face and behaved as if it was a chore, like picking up dog poo. So essentially, they have something called buddy watch. Other trainees have to be with her and keep an eye on her, and they are constantly complaining, saying, I don't understand why we have to do this. She had to go get her meds from her drill sergeants. They would throw them at her. Like, this is not an environment where she can actually thrive in. When she went to get help, the ER doctor was like really forceful with her, saying, suicide is not an option. That's a form of shaming. Like, she already knows that it's not an option. That's why she asked for help. And then my favorite thing that people do when somebody tells them that they're thinking about suicide is they compare their life to that person that's thinking about suicide. That same ER doc told her that they had their face blown off, their leg blown off. Oh, I'm doing just fine. I don't understand why you're having such a hard time being in pain just for your little sprain or whatever. That's another form of shaming. Like, we are not all the same, and we all can't handle things. And the other thing that I think about with that is when he went into combat, he expected to get blown up. When she joined the Army and went to tech school, she did not expect for any of this to happen. She didn't expect to be starving because nobody would ensure that she was eating. It's just insane to me. The other thing one last thing that cracks me up about suicide is everybody tries to normalize it. They're like, thinking about suicide is normal. No, it's not. It is not normal. It is common. Thinking about suicide as a stress response. It is basically getting to the last thing on your list to make whatever pain go away. It is not normal. And I'm not telling people to be like, you're crazy. I would say it's common. And it's common because we create the environment for it to happen. So with current research on suicide, perceived burdensomeness, thwarted belongingness, and hopelessness are the key ingredients for suicidal thoughts. Why are we not working to prevent this? Why do we compare ourselves to others and shame them for having thoughts of suicide? Why are we only trying to prevent intent and attempt? How effective are the current prevention strategies at even preventing that? Do you have any thoughts on that, Michelle?
Yeah, I mean, it takes so much courage for you to even share her story, and as a mother, for you to even have, again, the bravery behind it, because sometimes people, I think, misconstrued tough love as a kind of like, oh, we're gonna kind of wake you up, right? Jolt you into stop thinking about the suicidal ideations. But like you said, the environment is created to such a point. As an Army and as a retiree and from the Army, right? It's really disheartening to hear that during a time where you're supposed to be excited about being in and being a brand new soldier and going through basic training. And, I know you guys call it tech school, we call it AIT, same thing. You're going to learn how to be a soldier in the Army, right? You're learning. For a drill sergeant to even say, oh, that's just a splatter, probably from somebody else, that drill sergeant in itself, honestly, should be just recycled. And that's one of the words that we use for somebody that needs to go all the way back to week 1, where they had no idea what the Army is about and haven't even passed week 1. Because honestly, again, it's disheartening to hear that here you are towards the end of your military career, and what we're supposed to do is spring new soldiers up, new military members up in any field. And what we're supposed to do is allow the empathy and the experiences that we had to help elevate them. I never believe in tearing anybody down to build them up, ever. And I think that somewhere our humanity has been lost in that. Even in the stories that you shared, even with Kyra going through her struggles and her challenges, just trying to be a soldier. Like right now, we're struggling trying to keep people in ranks to be soldiers and to become soldiers because we are in the limelight. I think the perception is key, and we have to perceive whatever it is that everybody feels like in the moment and what they feel like it, and have empathy, enough empathy to remind ourselves that we were once there too. We just didn't, as drill sergeants, you have to have a certain rank to be able to be there, right? And you're supposed to be looked up to. You're a leader, right? You're not just managing people and telling them where to go. You're supposed to lead them forward. And I think somewhere along the line, it's been lost somewhere. So it's really disheartening.
So you don't think it's always been this way? You think it's actually gotten worse?
I think progressively it has gotten worse. I think, again, I went into where, when I joined the Army, it was, the slogan was be all you can be, not an army of one. I think that the slogans was lost in translation, where it became, for be all you can be in the Army was one of the ones where it empowered you to be everything that you can dream of in the military, in the Army. Then, a couple, different slogans came around, and then Army of One kind of stuck throughout all these years. And Army of One the intention of Army of One was never for you to feel that you are alone in the Army. It was supposed to be one voice, one accord, one brotherhood, whether you're female or male, one army, meaning that every single person, regardless of gender or creed, was one, and you never left a soldier behind. So I do believe that humanity in itself, because we have gotten to the point where empathy is gone, humanity is just left to like, oh, it's just another day, another time. The war, right, has really taken the emotional aspect of empathy, like empathy, not sympathy, empathy, not silver lining it, empathy. And I think
Right.
that shifting the mindset of, like you said, are we at the, what are we preventing? If we start looking at the mind in itself, like again, what Joyner's suicidal theory, and look at it, why is it that people think the way they do? Because what we have done is, like you said, we have normalized, like, oh, it's normal for you to think about suicide. No, I think as a society, we have normalized it, but it has become a commonality. Like
Well, I think the
anyone
reason
can
why
do
we
that.
normalize it is because of that sympathy thing that we try to do, or we try to, like you said, silver lining everything. I'm always seeing stuff. Even if your life is going to shit, like, you should be grateful that you're breathing. And it's fine if you are grateful that you're breathing, but telling somebody that that's how they're supposed to feel, just making it, we try to make everything normal so people don't feel ashamed. But I think that's the wrong tactic. I think we need to talk about it being common. I think we need to start changing the terminology, because I believe that words matter. What we say matters. And I didn't realize how much normalizing suicide bothered me until this situation. Because even in my class, like, I'm going to admit right now, like, I used to tell, it's normal to think about suicide. But when I would say that, I would explain why I say it was normal is because it's that last thing on everybody's list. And now I'm like, wait a minute, no, it's not normal. It is a fight or flight survival instinct that we are getting down to that is detrimental to who we are. So, and just so everybody knows, we didn't mention this at the beginning, but like Michelle said, she is retired Army. I'm an Air Force veteran. And honestly, I think I did pretty well not using any Air Force terminology in her story. I did well, right? I did good.
You did great.
Okay.
Except for tech school. That's not it.
Did I say tech school?
You did.
I know I said AIT at least once, but you're right. I
Yeah,
probably
you
threw in
did. You
tech
did.
school.
Yeah, no, but
So
it's fine. I think it's fine. No, but I think that it's true. I think that, words do matter. And I think changing the narrative so that we can be able to say that's not normal, it's common. I think it'll make a difference, a huge difference, when we
yeah,
continue to do like great works for suicide and what we are trying to attempt.
I'm changing the world one word at a time.
That's right.
All right. Are we ready to get the last one going?
Yeah. So,
Okay.
red flags. Bullshit.
Yes, they are, in my opinion. So according to the VA and other agencies, not just the VA, there's a lot of agencies that deal with suicide prevention. Red flags for suicide that we can see, because not all of them we can see, are the following: appearing sad or depressed most of the time. It's a pretty long list, y'all. Hold on. Anxiety, agitation, sleeplessness, mood swings, rage or anger, engaging in risky activities without thinking. I love that they added the without thinking, because usually we just say engaging in risky activities. Losing interest in hobbies, work, or school, increasing alcohol or drug misuse, neglecting personal welfare, deteriorating physical appearance, withdrawing from friends and family, showing violent behavior, giving away prized possessions, and getting affairs in order. Those are only the ones that we can witness, and that is a lot of things to try to keep track of. And honestly, because I took this class, it's called Calm Training, and of course it's mostly a VA type of thing. So I'm in there with a bunch of folks from the VA they all had wonderful hearts, but I don't think that they get prepared for service members. So I'm the only former service member in there, and all these groups that I was a part of, I realized one thing is that they believe that service members are going to behave the same as civilians, like never serve service members. I had a couple conversations, and I'm so glad that I went to this class just for this reason. Because if I could just help one mental health provider in the VA system understand this, when we go to basic training, basic combat training, whatever your service calls it, they do break us down. And I know you don't agree with that them doing this, but there is a positive way to do it. They break us down. They condition us to be the way that service needs us to be. It's called psychological conditioning. And then throughout our career, we are psychologically conditioned. Okay. So if you are like an 11 Bravo infantry dude, right, or chick, the way you behave is going to be different than somebody like me that's a paper pusher, because you are conditioned that when you're in danger, that you hide, that you do certain things when you feel that danger coming on, and nobody reconditions us when we get out. We have to do that on our own. So that takes a really long time if it ever happens. They talk about things in here like, where was it at? I had to write the list down, y'all. I couldn't remember all of it. But something about like withdrawing from friends and family and stuff like that, or showing violent behavior, it might actually be just a part of their training. And so don't accuse them of being psycho. Ask them why they behave that way. One of the scenarios was this soldier was hiding in the bathroom, and his wife was banging on the door, right? And so in the scenario, they focused on his behavior, not hers. So he's already hiding, right? He's scared. So either he's trying to protect himself or he's trying to protect his wife from him. And she's making it worse by banging on the door. And nobody even in the scenario, and even when we talked about it as a group, the mental health professionals did not even address her behavior. That needs to be talked about within the military community. So I understand we have to have some type of list or whatever, but I really think that this list is bullshit, because it really takes away from us being vigilant. If you tell me, oh, just look for these 20 things. Oh, they don't have these 20 things. Like, what are we doing? Or they have these 20 things because it's just who they are. Now we think everybody's killing themselves. That's not. And I actually have a story to tell you about me and the fact that I had none of these red flags and I was thinking about suicide. So here we go. I was actually having thoughts of suicide over a 1 month period of time. And the reason why it lasted a month, I think, is because nobody knew I was thinking about suicide. So I appeared happy. I found new interests. I put everything I had into work, and I started working out. I got sexy. I bought new clothes. I got some new tattoos, made new friends, reconnected with old ones. I bought new possessions. I was stalling on filing for divorce. So that definitely isn't getting my affairs in order. Looking at all of that paints one picture. But on the inside, I felt so ashamed. I felt so hopeless. I never even considered my own suicidal thoughts and the lack of intervention. I silently suffered. Eventually, I came out of it. I didn't know how important my story was until I had this perfect moment in my Safe Talk class. And I'd love to tell you guys about that. In Safe Talk, we don't really talk about red flags. I mean, we kind of mention a few things to look for, but we explain that it's about behavior changes, okay, more so than looking for that list. And I always like to key in on the top 3 red flags and how they are different for everyone. So like I'll ask my class, I'll be like, okay, what's a red flag? And they always say the same 3 red flags: giving away possessions, disheveled appearance, and oh my goodness, now I can't remember what the other one is. But, they give me the 3 basics. So then I start giving them different examples. So like giving away prized possessions, right? I asked the class, I'm like, hey, what are my prized possessions that would make you concerned that I'm thinking about suicide? They started talking about cars and jewelry and all this crazy stuff. That's not what people need to be concerned about. And they laugh at me because what they need to be concerned about for me is my New Kids on the Block poster, my old scratch and sniff sticker collection from when I was a kid. And there's a reason why those are prized possessions, but you wouldn't know that about me unless you knew me, right? When they go to leave for the break, I asked my class to brainstorm other, ways of discerning if somebody's thinking about suicide. And they have like 4 categories. It's like, what would you see, hear, sense, and learn, right? And learn means what do you hear from other people, like gossip, right? I always review them before class to try to, put all the common ones together and stuff and just have, some answers for them. As I was looking at this one specific class's answers, I saw all my tells. And I didn't even realize that those were my tells until that class. And it hit me. So I'm like, this is a great teaching moment. Y'all don't know me well enough, but I love those teaching moments. So I grabbed those from the front and put them on the back, put them aside. And after I shared the other ones that people normally, talk about, I started putting up different ones from that list. I'm like, hey, is this person thinking about suicide? And every time I put one up there, they would always explain why that person was definitely not. And they were so adamant, there's no way this person's thinking about suicide. And when they were done, I said, after they were all up on the board, I said, this was me, and I was thinking about suicide. They got quiet. They quickly understood the point of the lesson more than any of my other classes. I want to tell you what was on those sticky notes so you understand why I really think that red flags are bullshit. I lost a size within the first few months of my then husband going to Korea.
And so many people were like, girl, you're looking good. What are you doing to lose all that weight?
I was doing absolutely nothing but being happy that my husband was gone, which I felt ashamed of. I started going to the gym and running 6 days a week.
Way to go. Look at all that work. It's paying off.
What were my 4 children doing while I was at work 9 hours, the gym an hour and a half, and running an hour? Not to mention my hour commute and 5Ks every month. I went from being available for my children 24 hours a day to 11 and a half hours, and 8 of that was sleeping. I bought new clothes.
It must be nice to be buying all those new clothes. Better get all you can before you get that divorce.
I hate shopping, and that's all I'm going to say on that one. I do. I hate shopping. You laugh. Because I'm pretty sure you like shopping, don't you? I think you like shopping, huh? I've seen your closet.
Amazon.
You like shopping, you just don't like people.
That's so true. I love people, just, not everybody.
Let's see here. I worked my ass off and became the best at it.
You're the best that we have.
I was avoiding my own problems by focusing on others. This was one of my favorite ones that was on the board. I got 6 new tattoos that year.
Man, look at all that ink. Nice work. Who did it?
It was an expression of my pain, people. I was getting a divorce, one of the situations we usually pause for when it comes to suicide.
And the favorite one for me was, oh, you look so happy. Why are you even upset? You wanted a divorce, didn't you?
Granted, it was my 4th. You think this is funny, but this is stuff that people said to me. Granted, it was my 4th divorce, and the others were a piece of cake. Like, seriously, chuck the deuces. But this one was different, and no one even believed me when I told them that. My divorce should have been the beginning of people paying attention to me and the drastic changes I was making in my life. People should have taken me seriously and asked more when I did share my feelings. So what are your thoughts on my suicidal experience? And I think I've told you the story before.
Yeah, you have. I think that we had just began to reconnect, and you did look different. And I didn't know it was all 6 tattoos. So I was the one that I know I was one of those that said, oh my goodness, look at all that ink. It looks awesome. Who did it? Because I was going through my own stuff.
Right.
My own self-expression. But, again, it is so brave to be able to talk about everything so far to, culminated to your own experience, because it's so different. The thing is, if I may, in the first 2 stories that we shared, that you shared with your children, they showed signs. Those similar ones at the, VA, suicideprevention.gov, and every single social media outlet, website that talks about suicide prevention, those are off. And you don't have to check all 20. The issue is that you didn't exhibit not a one. Everybody looked at that, even for myself. And it wasn't again until we sat down and talked, because then we shared other things, that realized that sometimes we put on a brave face for anybody else because we don't want no one else to call us crazy. As mothers, take our children away and then say, oh, wait, you wanted the divorce. All of that stuff is irrelevant. And we try to just mask it. And our thoughts are still there, right?
Right.
You still are spiraling underneath that smile that you put, and you show up to work, you look great, you had your lipstick on and everything. And I think the only time that if something was wrong, you didn't have mascara.
I would tell my class that. I was like, my hair is always going to look a mess, but if I don't have eye makeup on because you can't see my peepers because I wear glasses, then you need to ask me. And matter of fact, one of my students saw me like a couple months after class. She's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, why are you asking? And she's like, well, you don't have any eye makeup on. I'm like, oh my God, you remembered. I didn't even know she was on my students because, I have so many students. But I think the other thing that really bothered me is that when I did try to talk about, being upset about my divorce, like I was totally, why are you even upset? Like shaming me on that. And the other thing that I noticed going through this podcast with you is I had a much harder time telling my kids' stories than telling mine. I don't know if you noticed that I was a little bit more upbeat and energetic with mine, and with theirs, I was very matter of fact. And just so everybody knows, I did ask their permission to share those stories. But that's one of the reasons why I asked Michelle to be here, because telling my own story is one thing, but talking about the possibility that I could have missed something or my kids maybe didn't get the help that they needed, that just really bugs me. It was so hard. I think something else that I told you, Michelle, too, when I told you the story, like the first or 20th time I told it to you. One, yes, I didn't want my kids taken away. But the other thing is that my job was resilience and suicide prevention. And I'm like, yeah, there is no way that I am going to let anybody see me like this. I was like, I have to be the strong one because I'm out here trying to help other people prevent their suicide. And what does that say about me if I can't even prevent my own thoughts of suicide, which is absolutely insane. But that's how I was thinking.
But it's not, right? We talked about the normalizing, and the thing is that we're conditioned as I wouldn't say providers in the sense of like mental health, but you do the same type of service, kind of like similarly to what I even did. I still still helped you train with all that stuff. So in that realm of life, right? And then even in the transcourse of my educational career, do the same thing. We are, and I go back to Brene Brown's shame.
Love her.
Right? Because the shame theory is huge. And she talks about a lot about vulnerability and the fact that there is strength in vulnerability. The issue is that not everybody sees that. Like we as professionals in the field see that. Yeah, we can be open. But in our experience, once we open, and again, my story, but once we open our experience and what exactly is going on behind that smile that we just have this mask on, everybody else looks at us like, oh, poor you. And they completely victimize us. And we're like, wait, we're on the up now. That was spiraling like months ago. And I'm up on the upward spiral now, not the downward. Not just sharing my story with you because it's okay to share, because like you said, you're upbeat about it's your story to share. So it's a lot different than when you're a mom, that's your children going through that. And you're like, oh, how can I fix it? And we cannot. All we can do is share our stories and our experiences with them so that they can hopefully take little bits and pieces from it and help themselves with it. But the biggest issue is that we have in our own professional careers, professionals within our field look at us funny, and I'll say that word, because We are, oh, how can you think about suicide? How are you thinking about suicide? And you have the means to be resilient, and you are teaching about suicide prevention. But honestly, when you have the means, in the moment you act. And in my own personal experience, sometimes I have to be able to get out of my house because I know I have the means to be able to do what I once did before, and I don't want to go there again. But in that moment of despair, there are no other thoughts, and it doesn't have to be a weapon, but we weaponize anything else that we can find in order for us to make the pain go away. Because of that sense of hopelessness, nobody understands it. And
Yeah.
that's the sad part, that when we are in our own fields, not all of us, right? But most of us in the same field will look at us a little funny, like we can't do the jobs that we can do. Actually, I feel like we're better prepared because we can tell the story in the way, like you said it in your own class, and say, I have none of these. I had not one of these red flags that they teach you to look for, because that's the truth. You can be happy go lucky, have lose weight
But
and
that was a
look
big change
great.
for me, right? That the
Right,
way
right.
I was just this huge
Huge, huge.
change. And the funny thing is that I actually did get super emotional and depressed, but it was after my thoughts went away. It's almost like I could allow myself to feel when I finally got where I think I started going to therapy or something. And then when I started feeling that way, people treated me differently. Like, I told you that my boss came and took work away from me. And I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, you're having a hard time. And I'm like, this keeps me sane,
Yeah.
and even people that have had thoughts of suicide, they're not even empathetic. Like, because it's so shameful. We make it shameful. So yeah, it's just crazy. Yeah. I really appreciate you being here, Michelle, and sharing with me. I don't think that I could have done it without you. And I mean that from my heart. Do you have any final words for the audience?
I do. I actually have one of my favorite quotes behind me. But I definitely want to say that beauty begins the moment that you decide to be yourself. And actually, it's by such a great person. It's Coco Chanel. Because you know I have to be dainty and you love it.
Yes, I know.
But
That is
no,
a great quote.
seriously,
Yeah.
it's an amazing quote that really has helped me realize that the beauty is really from within. Because when you decide to be authentically you, nobody really can take that away from you. So I really appreciate the time, and the, even asking me to be here with you tonight. It's been amazing, and I always love collaborating with you. So
Thank you.
I love you, my friend.
I love you too. So I like that quote. And oddly enough, when I allowed myself to start owning my story and be authentic, and be vulnerable, I actually got stronger. So I wholeheartedly, support that. Here's my final thoughts for this podcast. I really think that now is the time to prevent suicidal thoughts by changing our environment. And the only way you can do that is to start with yourself. Remember that thwarted belongingness, perceived burdensomeness, and hopelessness are the key ingredients for suicidal thoughts, and that shame increases hopelessness. So look at how you're treating people. I'm not saying you have to be friends with everybody, but ousting people, making it seem like it's just so much trouble to do anything for them, shaming them, which even comes from silver lining things. Look out for those things yourself. And maybe if we all can, improve, we can change the environment. Also, I think that now is the time to pay attention to those around us. Notice these changes, whether they're positive or negative, and just ask them about them. If people would have just asked me instead of assuming, and I think even one time when somebody asked me, what are you doing to lose weight? And I said, it's out of sheer happiness that my husband is gone. Like, that should have been a key indicator. And I actually, my eyes welled up because I felt so ashamed, but I got so tired of people asking me. And I just wanted somebody to notice that I was in pain. So don't assume that it's good or bad. Just ask. Inquire because you care and that you're interested, and not necessarily in what they want to talk about, but interested in that person. And lastly, now is the time to have self-compassion. If you believe that you messed it up, whatever it is, try again. Check on your friend again, go back and ask the question again, go listen again. There's always another chance to make things right, and don't beat yourself up about it. Thank you for listening, and I hope you've been inspired to be more suicide aware and have the courage to engage. You can follow Live with Courage on Facebook and LinkedIn, or visit our website at www.livewithcouragetoday.com.